Welcome to Unit 7. We're going to be discussing the rise of Islam in this first section. This unit corresponds to Chapter 10 in your book. There's lots of new information. We're going to be studying the historical concept of Islam. We'll be looking at the very basic beliefs of the religion, but remember, we're really looking at this from a historical point of view because the rise and spread of Islam changed a whole section of the world. So let's take a look at that part of the world where Islam first began. So the location is here in the Arabian Peninsula. This is located in Southeast Asia, and today we often refer to this area of the world as the Middle East. And it truly is in the middle. It is right in between Africa and Asia and Europe, so that goods and ideas were easily shared as they spread through these trade routes. Here is a very good map of the spread of Islam. As you can see, we're talking about the time period 632 to 750 in the Common Era. And if you look closely at the map, the kind of pinky red color where Medina and Mecca are located, these are areas that became Islamic lands at the death of Muhammad when he died in 632. But look at how far it spreads in a very short period of time, all the way over into Africa, all the way into Europe, into Spain. This is a picture that I find very telling of the Arabian Peninsula. Much of Arabia looks like this. It is desert, it is hot, it is forbidding. This is not an easy place to live. It's not very inviting. You can see you're certainly not going to make your living off agriculture in this. And so, from this, the Arabian Peninsula really had to develop into a very strong trade center. Now, partly how you get across these areas is that the only bright spot in miles and miles of desert are these beautiful desert oases. And as you can see from this picture, it's amazing. It is this little slice of heaven right here in the middle of miles and miles of sand. So if you're traveling through the desert, you absolutely need to know where these are, because if not, you will very quickly perish in 120-degree temperatures with no water and no food in sight. Except at these little areas, these became vital to trade. So, who would want to live in a place that's like this? Well, there are these people. These people are called Bedouins. They are nomadic. Remember, we talked about them before when we talked about the hunter-gatherer society when we first started way back in September. If you're nomadic, you need to move from place to place to find food. And this is what these Bedouins do. They make their living herding goats and sheep, and so you need to move yourself from spot to spot. As you saw in those earlier pictures, there is not much for goats and sheep to eat out there in the desert. So they were constantly on the move, constantly moving around. Another way that helped ensure their survival were the fact that they were organized into these clans or tribes. We're going to do something in class where you're really going to look into the Bedouin lifestyle, and it's really quite interesting. So by blending and banding together these family groups, Bedouins could survive in this very harsh landscape. Now today, Bedouins do still exist, although they only make up about 10% of the population in the Arabian Peninsula. Many became urbanized, they moved to cities, they started making their living in a fashion we would be more familiar with, rather than this very traditional value system. Now, Bedouins have a very distinct value system. They value courage, loyalty to their family, and warrior skills. And all of these are going to become key to the Islamic value system as well. Many of the early converts to Islam come from these Bedouins. So, how do they trade? They needed to use these very cool animals, camels, which they call the ships of the desert. These are amazing animals, perfectly suited for the desert lifestyle. So, I think they are really interesting. They can carry heavy loads for very long distances without food or water for several weeks at a time. There's no other animal that can do that. Horses certainly cannot do that. They can pull the heavy load, but there's no way that you could use a horse to cross the Arabian desert. Also, the Bedouins used them for more than just transportation. They used them for meat, so they killed them and used them for meat. They used their fur not only for their clothing, but they made their tents out of their fur. And then they used their droppings to burn for fuel. So these are really very useful animals, perfectly acclimated to this climate. You can see here, I thought he was cute on the left there. Look at the toes. Again, perfectly made in order to walk on sand. A hoof, although a horse can walk on sand, is not as well suited as this little two-toed deal is on the camel. A camel weighs about 1,500 pounds, which is the size of a very big horse. About 6 feet at the shoulders, 7 feet at the hump. So this is a very large animal. In that hump, there's not water. Despite what you were told when you were a kid, there is not water in that hump. There's fat. And again, this is what gives them the ability to go so far without sustenance. So the key point here is that camels were absolutely key, vital to the creation of the trade routes across the deserts of Arabia, and you will see later Africa as well. So I put this in just because I thought it was funny. You can watch the whole thing if you pull this up online, but I just wanted to show you a little bit.
Dawn at the Al Wafba camel racetrack on the outskirts of the city of Abu Dhabi. For centuries, the Arabs held camel races to celebrate special occasions. But in the last 50 years, camel racing has been transformed, echoing changes that have swept all across the Arabian Peninsula. Now, this is one of the richest sports in the world. The winner of this race stands to win $1 million. The prize money at stake means that today's camel racing has moved far beyond anything these handlers' grandparents could have imagined. In today's camel races, modern technology is in the driving seat. Literally. To save on weight, jockeys have been replaced by robots weighing no more than a laptop. The camel trainers drive alongside. They scream.
So, this is pretty funny, I think, but you can see they are still a vital part of the society in the Arabian Peninsula today. Whereas we do horse racing in this country, they do camel racing, and it only makes sense. But they're just such goofy looking animals that I wanted to show that to you. All right, back to more boring things, maps, which you love, I know. So these are the trade routes around 570. So this is well after Muhammad has died. The trade routes are definitely well in place at this point. But as you see through the yellow lines, in Arabia you have to go via land to get across, and then you link up to the sea routes from there. But look at how expansive it's going to be. And if you're up this way, look, you're going to link up to the Silk Roads, into India, into Russia going this way. You go this way and you hit Constantinople, which we learned about just a little bit at the end of our study of Rome. And again, perfectly located in order to hop on the Mediterranean Sea, and you get yourself over here to Western Africa as well as Europe. So let's talk a little bit about the religion before Muhammad. On the Arabian Peninsula, they were pagans, like most of the world was at this point, with the exception of the early Christians and the Jews. Most everyone is still worshiping paganism. Okay, so they're polytheistic. They believe in a lot of gods. In this, they did worship a god named Allah, which you're familiar with. That is their main god, their only god, I shouldn't say, the main god today. But he was just one of the many gods. He was the creator god. He was very important, but there were lots of other gods. And Mecca, which is a very important city today, was also very important at this point. It was right along the trade routes. It was a place people would stop. And the Kaaba, which I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, was there in the center of Mecca. Idols were placed in it to all of these different gods. So it was a center of worship before Islam was established. It was a pagan center of worship, and you will see that Muhammad will come to the Kaaba and make a very important statement about what Islam is. So as I said, monotheism definitely exists at this time. You have Christians, who are Arabs living in this area, and you have Jews, both of which worship one God only. This is a picture of what Mecca looks like today during the Hajj. This is a beautiful, beautiful sight. You can see the minarets all around the outside, and here in the center is the Kaaba, this black cube, and I will tell you about its importance. It is very, very important. All of this, these are people who have all come to make this pilgrimage. So, Mecca. The Kaaba is this black cube, as I said. In pre-Muhammad times, it was a pagan center of worship. It housed 360 different idols, and pilgrimages were made to it during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, for 1 month each year, pagans traveled to Mecca from all over to visit the Kaaba, so it was very important. At the Kaaba, they worshipped all of these idols that represented all their different gods, and they danced and they sang and they offered sacrifices, so very similar to pagan rituals that we know from the past. They also performed special rituals, such as walking around the Kaaba 7 times, kissing the corner of the sanctuary. These things are still practiced by Muslims today who visit this very holy site. During the holy month of Ramadan, all fighting was forbidden. So Muslims actually believe that the original Kaaba was established by Adam, who was the first man. So you can see there is a definite link back to the Jewish tradition and the Christian tradition, but that it was destroyed in the Great Flood, and according to tradition was rebuilt again by Noah. Someone else, if you're familiar with Christian stories and Jewish stories from the Bible, you know Noah. Muslims also believe that Abraham rediscovered the Kaaba when he was visiting his son Ishmael. And years later, the two of them rebuilt the Kaaba together as a place to worship God. So, according to Muslim tradition, Arabs are descended from Ishmael, while the Jews come from Abraham's second son, Isaac. I know it's a little confusing. We'll go over it a little bit more. It's just important to see how they are connected together, the three religions. So here we are, back to another map on trade routes. So hopefully you're getting the hint that trade routes are very, very important to learn during this time. Next year in World 2, and if you choose to take AP World, trade is so important. It comes into play in almost everything that you study next year. So Mecca was a very important trading route. And you can see it right here. So you see it's close to the Red Sea. It's not on the Red Sea, but it is close to the Red Sea. Here's another very important city which we will learn about, Medina. But back to Mecca, the city was this major hub for caravan routes coming across the desert, right this way, right? And because you could link up with the Red Sea and get out this way, right into the Mediterranean Sea, out this way to the Arabian Sea. So perfectly located. This is, you can see, it's right in the middle as well, so it's going to be the center for trade. The city was also very famous for its production of frankincense and myrrh, which I'm sure some of you are familiar with, used commonly for religious ceremonies, and was this very, very busy marketing center for traders and nomads who came and bartered for livestock and other goods. Next up, we're going to look at the beliefs and practices of Islam, but that will be next time. Don't panic. This is all we're doing for today, but there are a couple of assignments that I'd like you to do. First, please respond to this question on a separate sheet of paper. Your answer needs to be at least 3 to 4 full sentences. If you'd like to write more, I would love to see more than that, as you know. Your answer does not have to exactly restate this question, but when you write it, please make sure that someone who does not know what this prompt is will be able to understand your answer. So as you can see, the prompt is, what is the significance of Mecca in the exchange of goods between the Mediterranean regions and Eastern lands? Please feel free to use outside sources. Please feel free to look at your book other than the PowerPoint that we have here. But really think about this. Give it some good thought before you begin writing. Ooh.